Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Joanna Bucknell and you're listening to episode 7 of TAIT, that's TAIT, which is short for Talking About Immersive Theatre. Now, this podcast series pretty much delivers what its title suggests. I go out and about to meet and chat to all kinds of people involved in immersive performance, actors, directors, producers, venues and practitioners, to give you access and insight into the immersive work that they do. Now, before I let you at it this month, just a little apology. There is a little bit of background noise at various points throughout the discussion this month. Now, unfortunately, this is just one of the occupational hazards of me bringing you discussions from the places and spaces where the immersive practitioners make their work. This month we were recording in Battersea Arts Scratch Bar, and they're currently fixing their roof, so there's a little bit of background noise at various points. So I do apologise for that, but I do hope that it's not too disruptive. Okay, so I'm now going to let you get at it. So I'm here at Battersea Arts Centre with Anthony to talk about the immersive performance work that he does with Death's Head Theatricals in New York, which is in the United States. Just thought I'd better say that because there are people listening from all over the world. So Anthony, can you give the listeners a bit of an insight into who you are as an artist and what your background is?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is
so
lovely. So I am one of the co-founders of Death's Head. We are a dark, immersive theater company based in New York City. We specialize in immersive theater that gives audience a glimpse into the darker sides of reality and confronting issues, and I think a lot of our work is very history-based. Mm-hmm. When we originally founded the company, we had a historian, an immersive theater practitioner, a magician, and a theater scholar as our four principal core members.
Okay.
So our work kind of spanned out of our love for history and magic and all these things. Myself personally, I'm traditionally from a musical theater background, which normally immersive and musical theater very rarely run together, but I love environments and big worlds and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So we are an anonymous theater company. That's why you're only hearing my first name. All of our creative teams are secret because we bring in a lot of people on a case-by-case basis who work at a lot of the other big immersive shows or are designers who have shows on Broadway and things like that. It gives them a chance to try new techniques and try more risky things without the idea of their reputations being hurt.
Okay.
If something doesn't work as well as they anticipated.
Yeah.
Also, it's a great marketing tool for us because we do dark immersive theater.
I was just going to ask you about marketing because often, especially with productions, names help to draw audience.
Right.
So you would expect that to potentially be a barrier, but have you found that to actually be a strength?
It has. It's been a huge strength. We don't have a website. We don't have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram and a Twitter, and we use non-conventional marketing press releases and blog posts on other people's blogs to get the word out about the show, which we find really works for us because a lot of our events are secretive and dark, and we're building a brand as that. When you hear Death's Head, you know what you're going to go see. Mm-hmm. But we find that we've tapped into a very niche market.
Yeah.
Even more niche than your immersive theater market in the States, which is very rabid for work. But we've tapped into an even smaller market that really feeds our shows and keeps coming and seeing everything that we do, which we
So do people then, to be able to kind of access the work, have to kind of engage on social media in order to know what's going on?
Our show that we just did, Curiosities, we did an immersive rush policy on the show. So on the day of the performances, we would tweet and Instagram a picture and the location of the immersive rush. It changed every day, and a password. And we would send one of our cast members to the spots 3 hours before the show in character. And nothing super distinguishing about them. I mean, they might have they would be wearing their costume. So for Curiosities, it was slightly period dress, but nothing kind of super out of place. And the reactions of audience members who did the rush were very interesting. I was kind of hovering around the first night to just make sure things went smoothly and seeing how audience members, and we did it in Schubert Alley, which is right where all the Broadway shows are. It's this alley that runs between the theaters, and one of our actors was standing there, and we had this woman who's been staring at him for about 5 minutes from across the alley, and then comes over and very quietly says, "Excuse me, do you know anything about Curiosities?" And he said something along the lines of, "What's the password? And do you have money?" And collected cash and gave her an index card with the secret location of the show. Because with Curiosities, you only got the location of the show once you bought your ticket. And so we would hand them an index card with the location. We would take down their name for the door, and they would pay for their ticket, and then they would go on their merry way.
Do you think that kind of exclusivity then is kind of one of the draws for people to the work?
Yeah, absolutely. Also because we want each audience member to have a very special experience happen to them, whatever it is. And obviously, it's financially impossible to have one actor per audience member on shows of this scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Curiosities we limited to 50 audience members per show, and our principal cast was 12. So it was less than 5 to 1. It was 4 to 1 roughly,
which is
which is great.
Yeah, it's a massive investment in that.
And because a lot of our one-on-ones happen several times a night, we guaranteed that every audience member would get one at one point, either a solo one-on-one or one of our small group one-on-ones. We had a seance that happened in the space that was 4 audience members and 1 performer.
I read about that, and actually that's, for me, I'm always so jealous, like when I've been at Punch Drunk's work or anyone else's, where they are very limited compared to the number of audience there are. When I see someone led away into a caravan or led away into a shop, I'm always like, me, I wish that was me. And I don't always get that, but it sounds like if I was to come to one of your pieces of work, I would have a much greater chance of getting that kind of one-on-one interaction.
And we want that, because that taps our audience into what we're creating in the world, and we get to share a personal story with them. And I think that's what audience members are looking for.
Yeah.
If you're breaking down the proscenium, if you're getting rid of the seats, then obviously they don't just want to sit back and watch a story unfold.
No.
They want to be involved. And with something so intimate, they want an intimate experience.
Well, I ask that a lot, because sometimes I go to shows and I find myself asking, why did you make me get out of my seat? I don't feel like I've had a good enough reason. I might as well sit and watch. And it doesn't always happen, but sometimes when that does happen, and I think for me as well, the highest currency in this kind of work is those moments of intimacy. And I feel like that's what I'm really after, and they're the moments that I'm desperate for. And I always wonder, is that just me? Because I'm a performer anyway, so I like to play in that way. But I think that people really do crave that kind of intimacy, and I wonder why as well. In an age where we're so disconnected through so many different ways, and people want that.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we spend our whole day buried in our cell phone or in our computer or whatever it is, and we have to, to function in today's society, you have to be wired in that to be able to put your phone away and really connect to a human being, a stranger, even. Yeah. And by the end of that one-on-one experience, they're no longer a stranger to you, is really beautiful and really powerful, and we're all about sharing intimate, personal stories with our audience, and I think that's why we're considered dark immersive theater, is because when you get to that personal level, the stories that you share with your closest friends don't tend to be what good things happened to you.
No, of course not.
It's the struggle.
Yeah.
And we recognize the struggle that everybody goes through on a daily basis, no matter what it is. Mm-hmm. And our shows tap into those kinds of things.
Well, it creates a kind of a risk, doesn't it? But it's not a risk where you're genuinely in danger, but there is always a risk of engaging in an intimate situation with a stranger. But they tend, for me, to be the most rewarding moments of allowing yourself to give yourself over to that moment and to be in that moment. And that's what I really enjoy as well.
It's all about being connected. My parents came into town to visit me about a month ago, and they had never seen any immersive theater, so I decided to take them to Sleep No More in New York, and, not knowing whether they would enjoy it or not enjoy it, I just kind of want to be like, this is what I do, this is what I create, and this is the most mass-market, palatable version of what I can take them to.
Yeah.
Because it's still edgy, it's still a great production.
Yeah.
But I think they would have been far more hesitant to go to something in a warehouse in Brooklyn than, this.
Well, Sleep No More also is accessible in a way because of the text.
That's true.
And because we know the story.
Yes, that's true.
And I think all the shows that are based in stories that we know and stories that are familiar have slightly less of that risk involved because we have that certain expectations that come with those texts, even if they're challenged or they're problematized.
What I admire about that show completely is their ability to turn off audience members' brains for them and let them be engaged. I definitely once went to the show for the sole purpose of watching how they navigated a certain technical thing.
Yeah.
I got to the end of the show and realized that I totally forgot to look for it because I was so involved in what was going on that I was like, oh no, I missed 3 times because the show loops. I was like, 3 times I missed what I actually paid to come see the show for.
Yeah.
But I took my parents to the show and I ran off to do my own thing, as I tell everyone they should do.
Yeah.
And I got a one-on-one that I hadn't seen before. And where something very personal and intimate is shared with an audience member. And it involves, at the end, this actor collapsing into your arms and in tears and just holding you.
Oh my God.
And I found myself crying uncontrollably in this moment. And that just reinforced to me the importance of this kind of work.
Yeah.
Because where else do you get that? You really don't.
No, you really don't. And contemporary life just is kind of set up for exactly the opposite of those kind of encounters, I think. So I think this gives that sort of safe space to be able to do that, and that's one of the things that I love about it, and I think is really beautiful. That sort of leads me into, because I was going to ask you about what makes your work distinct, but we've already really talked about that. So some of the people who are listening will be based in the UK or in Australia or other places, so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the immersive scene in New York and where your work kind of fits within that.
Sure. So the New York immersive scene is incredibly different because there's not grants and arts funding for that kind of thing, that even Sleep No More, which is a Punch-Drunk show, is not run in the States by Punch-Drunk. It's run by a production company called Immersive, which is run by a gentleman called Randy Weiner. They also produce a show called Queen of the Night, and they've been involved with a bunch of other things. And they run the day-to-day operations, and when you do immersive in New York City, it has to be commercially viable.
Yeah.
You have to at least recoup, which is a struggle because there's not also the access to spaces that you have here. We were having this conversation earlier. I was wandering around today, and I was like, oh, look at all these beautiful, disused buildings
I know,
that
I know.
I want to use it, and a lot of the venues that we end up using are something else during the day, and we have to transform the space sometimes on a nightly basis, which is an additional struggle, or it's, the space is owned and used by somebody else and it's not entirely ours for our purposes, which is really hard. And there's this model that's emerged now where you add a restaurant and a bar space and whatever to your immersive show, so that's where the main cash flow comes in, not in ticket sales itself. Also, immersive theater in the States tends to be a lot more expensive than it is here.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was there.
Queen of the Night, their cheapest ticket was like $140. Now, it did include a 3-course meal with it, but, it's expensive.
Yeah.
Expensive. But there are very few companies doing immersive theater in New York. You get lots of site-specific things, and there are lots of little groups that do site-specific stuff. There's a great group that called Shakespeare in the Parking Lot that uses a parking lot in the East Village and mounts site-specific Shakespeare things there.
Okay.
And there's lots of site-specific things, but really the immersive pocket is small.
Yeah.
But the productions tend to be big. They, but even then, She Fell is 15 audience members per night, but they've been running for 3 years.
Yeah.
And they have shows every night.
Yeah.
Grand Paradise. These are both Third Rail project shows. And Third Rail produces some beautiful things.
Yeah.
Grand Paradise just got extended again, which makes me really happy because it's a very different piece. It's nice to see something that's different instead of it being dimly lit and being a thriller and emotionally intense. It's beautiful and nostalgic. It's so that's really nice to see something that's very different.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's going to be extended until I can get out there.
You know what? I hope so. That work deserves to go on forever and ever and ever. And I'm really thrilled that Third Rail is having such success with their shows.
Absolutely.
And now they're expanding to other cities, which is great.
I'm hoping they might come to London. Would be amazing.
Hey, Third Rail, you should come to London. You should come to London.
I've emailed with Tom Pearson.
Yeah.
I know that he's really keen on potentially coming over to the UK to do something. So I'm like, I really hope that happens.
Oh, I hope so too. I wish them all the success because they create some really beautiful things. And so the New York immersive scene, there's a core pocket of folks who do it. They do a lot of the same projects.
Yeah.
I mean, Dalton Dale, who runs Fourth Dimension, is doing a huge immersive piece that a couple of us from Death's Head are working on with him outside of Death's Head. He's producing New York's largest immersive haunted house. Awesome. And it's like an immersive theater haunted house. It's free roaming. It's like 25,000 square feet.
Wow.
It's huge in this basement of this historic building. It used to be a stable ring.
Well, often with haunted houses, actually you're pushed through them very quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you'll get a lot more of time.
You get a lot more time, and it's beautiful and elegant. And there's another immersive show in Orlando called Vault of Souls, which is an elegant evening of fear, and I think those kind of things are really cool.
Yeah, me too.
Because they're scary and intense, but also beautiful, and it's not dollar store costumes and masks and people jumping out of hallways. It's scarier on a much deeper level, which is something that we also try and tap into. Is what are your fears outside of blood and guts and chainsaws? And clowns with chainsaws.
That stuff gets very boring very quickly and very unfrightening. I mean, I loved horror when I was a teenager, massive horror fan, but I think horror, especially in film, has forgotten what's actually chilling, and often it's not seeing or the suggestion and the way that things move around things and the atmosphere. And of course, immersive theatre is absolutely
it's all about atmosphere. If you happen to be in New York during the Halloween season, for sure check out The Uninvited. it's scary and beautiful and all kinds of things. Dalton Dale is, I call him an evil genius. He's like a mad scientist of horror things. He created this immersive zombie experience that was also really terrifying.
Zombies are terrifying anyway, and the most terrifying thing I've been to has been involved zombies. So, and my partner absolutely loved it, but I was just terrified the whole time. I was just like, I literally feel sick. And you know it's safe, but you don't. You forget, and that's the best, isn't it? It's when you forget that you're safe.
That it's not real.
That it's not real.
That's the beautiful thing about it is getting and creating these environments. Creating the audience's experience is what's really important for us. Above everything else, it's about creating a world and immersion and audience experience. I think that trumps narrative for me.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
And, I have lots of philosophical debates with immersive practitioners about this, and there are definitely people who are like, story is the most important.
Absolutely.
Where in Curiosities, we did not have a central plot line, because in talking about what works and doesn't work in immersive theater, we all were like, all the immersive theater pieces that we go to that have a main plot line, nobody gets it. Nobody...
Well, it's too easy to miss things as well, isn't it? So if you're reliant
and
upon
you should
driving,
miss
exactly,
things.
you're going to miss things, which means if you've got to be able to follow the drive of the plot, that's going to be a huge problem.
and not that there aren't stories, but we had 12 principal cast members, and all of their stories were equally as important.
Yeah.
And the more of those stories you got and understood, the more of a complete picture you got of this world.
Okay.
So that, you are encouraged to learn about these characters and what's happening, because the more you find out, the more you're intrigued, the more you're tied into this world, and you can feel like an active participant versus just a viewer, which is nice.
And I think that's important, and I think the things that I've enjoyed the most, and not even thinking with an academic head at all, because everything is operating different dramaturgies, but as someone who loves immersive theatre and performance, the moments that I enjoy the most are when I feel that I have some agency and intimacy. And for me, they're the things that I seek out the most when I go to immersive shows, is agency and intimacy. And if it's got one or both of those things, then I tend to have a really good time.
And that's important for us, because it's very easy to try and recoup your money by packing as many people into the show as humanly possible.
Absolutely.
And there's definitely like that thread of thought, and it's important because you don't want to lose money. Most of the time, you're creating work out of pocket. And
exactly. You can't make work if you don't have any funds
if you don't have money to do it. But like Curiosities, we limited to 50 audience members per show, and with a 12-person principal cast, that came out to being roughly 4 audience members per actor.
Yeah, which
and because things looped, almost everybody, we guaranteed that everyone got an experience of some kind, whether that was a small group scene or a one-on-one or whatever. Everybody got some kind of intimate personal experience,
which is fab.
In this world that we had created, which is so important to us. Because we were talking about being an audience member, going to immersive theater. What do you like? You like one-on-ones. You like these personal experiences.
Absolutely.
What don't you like? Plot lines that you can't follow.
Yeah.
So how do we do more of one and less of the other?
And jostling through hundreds and hundreds of people to try to get a look of something is like
fun.
No.
It's no fun.
I'm like, that's fine at a music festival.
Right.
It's not fine at the theatre.
Yeah. No, immersive theatre is not Bonnaroo.
No, exactly. But there is this pressure, and actually one of the things I'm working with a colleague at Surrey at the moment to put together an immersive performance network, kind of an academic network. And some of the concerns that have been raised are actually that it's becoming hugely elitist because of the ticket prices. I know they're expensive here in London, also they're more expensive over in the States as well. But then there is this problem, isn't it? These things cost huge, vast sums of money to put together and to put together well. But then what we're doing is we're creating this kind of elitist audience who can afford to kind of go to these things, which is, as a practitioner, I really think this is a huge challenge. How do we potentially make this work accessible without it becoming elitist, but also without losing the quality of generating that quality of work?
And it's important. I find particularly performers, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, you do.
And I mean, I'm primarily a performer. I come from a performance background. I always want to pay actors what they're worth.
Yeah.
That's hugely important to me. And there have been times when we've been developing work when I'm like, guys, I'm so sorry. This is what we can afford to pay you. If you can't take this, I will call you when we have more money for the next
The norm
iteration.
here is people working for nothing, and there's a big movement at the moment to change that, because it's unacceptable that artists are just, in the UK, just not being paid.
And it's hard.
At all.
And it's hard when your production costs are so high.
Yeah.
That's why we do almost exclusively site-specific immersive work, which has its own challenges.
Yeah, of course.
But most of these places we don't have to set dress because they're already what they are.
What they are, yeah.
We've done 2 shows at the Morse Jamel Mansion on 163rd Street in New York. It's the oldest mansion on the Eastern Seaboard. It was Washington's headquarters during the Revolutionary War. Aaron Burr married Eliza Jamel. It was his house for a while.
Wow.
It's stunning.
So
but
it
it's also
gives you that.
Yeah, it gives you that. It worked for both of the shows really well, both of the shows that we did there. But there were the challenges of, well, there's a 300-year-old floor-to-ceiling portrait that we have to make sure audience members don't lean against. We use Eliza Jamel's bedroom, which still has her bed in it.
Wow.
And we, had to... How do you, without, putting big ropes around things, get audience members to not sit on the bed or lean on the bed?
And without breaking that fictive space that you worked so hard to construct as well, and having to tell people, don't do this or don't do that.
How do you do that when it's a museum during the day? Mm-hmm. You cannot bring in and hang practical theatrical instrumentation.
No.
How can you use the lights that are already there and gel things and put new bulbs in things? For our show Alving Estate there that we did with Journey Lab, on a nightly basis, I had to run around and put new light bulbs in things because then we had to reset for them to be a museum during the day. And obviously you can't have blue washes as the only lighting on the second floor during the day when you have school groups and all kinds of things. So that's a challenge.
Yeah.
But I find those spaces so much more fun than having to spend 4 months building in a warehouse.
Yeah.
Because you can create an environment, but we prefer to amplify the environment that's already there. I would rather add pieces and whatnot,
construct from nothing,
and then versus construct from nothing.
Yeah.
Which gives you freedom and constraints.
Well, that's kind of interesting because although A Drowned Man for Punch Drunk was a huge constructed space, actually the space we're sat in right now was where Mask of the Red Death happened, and actually their earlier work really did work about amplifying and working within, this beautiful building that we're in, Battersea Arts. And although they added lots of stuff to it, actually the site itself brought a lot to that. And I love the fact that there's the remnants, many, 10 years on, maybe more, it's all still here. And I think that's really interesting. And I think necessity is what has moved their work into big spaces that they're having to construct for themselves.
And also, if you're doing something on the scale, they're producing on an enormous scale.
Huge. The Drowned Man was huge.
It was huge.
There were cars in there.
I thought it was stunning and beautiful, and I loved it.
Blew
But
me away.
When you get to that size and scale, for the specificity of what they're doing, they, you have to.
You just can't. Exactly. You just can't take a place like this for a year with nothing else going on.
Exactly.
In it. And so I think that's
and
what
even more so in New
it.
York City, that spaces just don't exist unless, because you have to try and keep things in Manhattan or as close to Manhattan as possible.
Will people not travel out then to things?
It's hard. It's hard to get people to travel, especially if you're it's in Queens, it's in Brooklyn, it's, people are like, ooh, Brooklyn, that's so far. And it's not. It's a 15-minute
Brooklyn.
It's a
Brooklyn
15-minute train ride. It's
went.
so easy. But we were worried about getting people to 163rd.
Really?
To the mansion. Yeah. there was that concern as people travel up that far, and obviously they did because we sold out.
The audience are fairly hardcore. I mean, I have trekked to some crazy places to experience immersive performances, but I'm a bit of a diehard. But maybe that is who is.
I mean, and that's important. I mean, when you're doing shows like, you can do a Then She Fell and Grand Paradise, because I think Grand Paradise is 50 people. Then She Fell is 15.
Yeah.
People will travel. The diehards will definitely go, and when you have audience members that small,
you can sustain that.
You know, but Third Rail is a huge name now, whereas we're still coming into our own. And we definitely have this core pocket of fans that come out every time, and are really wonderful.
Well, you never know either what's going to be the turning point and what. I mean, Third Rail, I'm assuming really we're not expecting Then She Fell
to be as huge as it was.
To explode like it did in
absolutely.
that way, and to be extended and extended. And you never know when something might do that or why
right.
it does that.
It's the right piece in the right space at the right time can make or break you. Also, because there's so few immersive theater, that a couple of bad reviews will just kill you.
So a critic's quite important then in the New York scene.
It's a very interesting thing that they have a lot of power in some places and not a lot of power in another. I've done a lot of Les Mis, for example, in my musical theater.
Musicals, they make a big difference to critics, don't they?
But when it first opened in London, critics hated it.
I know.
The reviews were... And look, 30 years on, they're still here.
Yeah.
And the show was as good as ever. And it was because the audiences latched onto those things. But, are you going to more likely trust a review for a small, intimate thing in a secret location that you've never heard of, that, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal,
Well, that must be a big challenge for you. And I know some of the companies who work here, like Gingerline, they do gastronomic experiences. And they're the same. Everything is secret. There's no real images unless you have bought a ticket and are involved and that kind of thing. But the difficulty with that is you get a really niche, lovely following who will come to everything that you do. But then also it can be difficult for new audiences to know about you because of the secrecy. So I guess it's always balancing the exclusivity of keeping something secret, because that's part of the charm and the draw to what you're doing, but also making sure that you always have the possibility to have a new audience as well, to find out about you.
And it's important to the work that we're doing that it's secretive and that kind of thing, just because of the types of projects we work on.
Yeah.
It lends itself to that world, and that's why it's so important.
Yeah.
Our first public show, the Seance, we had people who came out because they thought they were seeing an actual seance.
Wow.
And were ghost hunting enthusiasts and that kind of thing. And they also really enjoyed the show.
Yeah.
But they came in not entirely knowing what it was and whether it was real or a show or what it was.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We had some people who came out to Curiosities thinking that they were just going to go see a sideshow.
Yeah.
Which I thought our marketing made it very clear, but...
I thought so too, and obviously because I had a really good look at everything before I came and met with you as well, because it's, again, because of the secrecy, it's difficult to make sure...
Yeah.
To get a sense for the work, because I haven't spoken to anyone before that I haven't engaged in their work, so this is kind of interesting for me, but I like the idea of that secrecy, but I thought actually the marketing is quite clear and kind of gives a really good sense of what to expect.
We tried, because we don't want the audience to come in unprepared, because we deal with some heady subject matter sometimes that if you're not prepared to go to that place and deal with that, then it makes it hard for us to engage you and immerse you.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's like playing a game, isn't it, in some respects, because everyone has to be wanting to play the game, because if someone doesn't want to play the game, it's going to be really hard to play the game. So I guess you want people to come along who want to engage.
We always encourage people to dress up and come to the show, and you know.
Do they as well?
Yes. Oh yeah. Curiosities.
Excellent.
We had this whole crew that showed up in a vintage car, all in pinup girl outfits. And they probably, I think, had the best time of anybody else because they came in wanting that experience, willing to participate in the experience. Yeah. And from the onset, we're ready to go and we're game to play.
Excellent.
And that's important for us.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the one-on-ones that I did involved playing Russian roulette with staple guns with an audience member and having them put staple guns to my neck and pull the trigger. And
that's a strong ethical challenge as well.
And it's all about, you know, the show is really about power dynamics in this environment. And so to play a mind game with a lone audience member alone in a bathroom with a table and 2 chairs and a bunch of staple guns that are all real is, you know, if you're not willing to play, it makes it really hard.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's such a vulnerable experience for the actor that, you know, if you're not willing to play.
But I think that's one of the important things, though, isn't it? Is I know as an audience member, you want to feel like you're coming in on equal terms with the performers in some ways, that you're both risking the same. And it's because you're both risking the same that you feel secure to take risks, I think. And the times when I felt uncomfortable or when I felt that the power dynamic has been weighted towards potentially the performers, and maybe that's more uncomfortable and more challenging for an audience member. But I guess, you know, different people engage with it in really, really different ways.
I mean, we also put our audience through quite a bit.
Yeah.
We had a one-on-one where an audience member was pulled into a room expecting to be seduced, and then gets tied up by this girl, and then has a bag placed over their head, and then she leaves.
Oh God!
And somebody else, her husband, comes into the space, and the power dynamic totally changes.
Of course.
And you're sitting there with your hands tied behind your head, with a bag over your head. Like that's a very vulnerable experience, and that's what we wanted.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I mean, we're trying to stay away from those horrible things that happened in the 70s and 80s with audience members being forced to participate in horrible things.
I absolutely agree, and
I refuse to go there.
I have nightmares of that. And actually, I think when some people, when you say participation in theatre, go white and just look horrified, and I think that's why is those things, some of those things that happened in the 70s and in the 60s, but they came from a very different place as well, I think. But I think that's what scares some people.
I mean, you and I had a long conversation earlier about the importance of consent in this.
Absolutely.
We are very clear that audience members have to consent to every single one of these experiences.
Yeah.
And we have this whole process of checklist of consent when choosing an audience member for a one-on-one or for a small group experience.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that they're game.
Yeah.
That they're down to play, and that they understand that we are not going to hurt them.
Yes.
That's very important for us. Uncomfortable is good. Unsafe is not good. If you feel unsafe, you check out of the experience.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're slightly uncomfortable,
that's
I
good.
like that.
Yeah, me too.
We want that from you. But if you feel unsafe, you check out.
Do you have to be more mindful as well? Because I know that the context is slightly more litigious as well than here. I think audiences are less likely here to kind of take offence in that way, and we don't have to worry so much about lawsuits and things like that.
We're talking about waivers now when you buy your ticket that you have to. I mean, that's not going to stop somebody from suing.
No, of course not.
But it's an extra piece of paper that says you agreed to X, Y, and Z. Which really, it sucks.
The only thing I've had to do that for was the zombie experience I went to, because there were weapons involved, so there was a lot of health and safety.
Yeah.
And I signed a waiver there, but as far as I know, I can't recall signing one for anything else. But I think that things are going to go more and more that way, just because it is about covering yourselves and for insurance purposes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Safety and
I mean, the amount of space and event insurance that we pay on some of these locations that we use are astronomical.
Really?
Because they want to make sure that we're covered.
Of course.
If something happens. We had to get, I think it was like $2 million worth of insurance for 2 performances of Curiosities. Obviously, we didn't pay that much, but that's how much we had to be covered up to by the venue. And I mean, I totally understand why, but that's a huge expense of the show.
I guess that's some of the differences, like some of the venues we have here, like this venue and lots of other venues, the venue has public liability insurance, so you're covered for that when you kind of come in. So again, there's quite a lot of differences in kind of how we operate, because we're covered by like the venue's covered and they're covered by PRS and all that kind of thing. So we don't have to worry quite so much. And for me, I work in an education environment a lot of the time, so we're covered covered by the university, who pay all of that kind of for us, which is quite nice.
That's so nice. I mean, outside of the educational, the experimental theater wing at NYU, there's really not anywhere that teaches that kind of immersive theater that I know of. I could be totally wrong. Podcast listeners, do not hold me to that.
If you know anyone who does it, then let us know.
Let us know, please, by all means. Outside of the experimental theater wing at NYU, I don't really know of, now there are private, Third Rail teaches some excellent workshops. If you're in New York, definitely do one of those. Hope Davis, who was at Sleep No More for forever, is amazing and teaches workshops all the time. If that's something that interests you, definitely take a workshop and learn more about it, because you can learn the techniques, but there are only certain people who are cut out to be immersive theater performers.
I completely agree. I think it's a real, and you don't know until you have a go. And that's the thing. And I was going to ask you about that, actually, because we've talked quite a little bit about Curiosities and a couple of the other shows. And I wanted to ask you, can you recall anything that has gone wrong or really surprised you? Because, of course, it's exactly why it's difficult to know if you're good at doing this kind of work, because audience can behave
so
in astonishing ways.
It's so true.
And do you have any kind of stories where they either massively astonished you or did something utterly abhorrent?
Yes. I mean, just from Curiosities, this last week we had so many things happen, which is the fun. I mean, I work with a core group of people that I really trust, and I trust them, completely, without hesitation. I mean, even doing my one-on-one, I had audience members... I had several audience members that were totally game to put a loaded staple gun to my jugular and pull the trigger because they'd had a couple of drinks.
Of course.
But I had one girl who refused to play, so I had to just let her out of the room because she wouldn't even close her eyes, because we have them close their eyes, and she was just huddled in the corner going, "Don't hurt me, don't hurt me, don't hurt me," and I'm like, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you. Trust me, I'm not going to hurt you. It's not that kind of experience. So that was interesting. We had audience members find their way for the second show of Curiosities. They snuck into the space. They were supposed to be held outside because we have an intro scene and speech that happens, which also kind of explains the rules of the world and that kind of thing. They snuck inside, and I was running around to make sure all the haze machines were operating properly right before the show. And they were just standing at the bar in the space, and I was like, okay, how do we get them out of here in character and not make them feel like they did something wrong?
Yes, absolutely.
Which was really hard, and I'm sure I made them feel like they were doing something wrong, which they were. But I didn't want to ruin the experience for them from the outset.
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? When you obviously you set some boundaries because you set up a fictive world, so you create some expectations, but in some respects you set up the possibility for anything to happen, so then you have to be prepared, I guess, for anything to possibly happen.
Yeah, we had some very interesting and levels of intoxication really change things. And we try and do a good job of if someone seems really wasted, we're not going to let them into the show.
No, and in fact, some of the shows here now, I'm going to pause this in a minute because they're making loads of noise. Some of the shows here are not allowed. It specifically says when you buy tickets that you are not allowed in if you're intoxicated or under the influence of drugs.
Yes.
Just because then it does become... Oh, it's right, they've stopped now. It does become difficult and it does become dangerous then, because people do behave more erratically.
Oh, absolutely.
When they're intoxicated in one way or another.
That was very interesting for us, particularly during Alving Estate, because we limited the amount of alcohol that audience members could purchase.
Ah, okay.
We didn't tell them that.
No.
But we weren't going to serve them more. I think we capped it at 3 drinks. We wouldn't serve them more than 3 drinks at our bar space.
Yeah.
But people pre-games before they showed up for the show.
This is one of the issues, and that's why some of the tickets here now are starting to say if you turn up having been drinking, you won't be allowed in.
And no refund because it's your fault.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've been told, and I've been there are a few occasions when people have been turned away as well because they turn up absolutely drunk, and you're just like, wow, that's dangerous.
I find a drink is helpful to the experience.
Yeah.
When I take people to Sleep No More, for example, we don't drink before.
No.
We get into Mandalay.
Yeah.
I buy everybody around right before. I'm like, 1 and that's it.
One is good. One is just relaxes you.
It relaxes you.
In a mood.
It makes you. It kind of allows you to not feel as anxious.
Feels disingenuous as well to be in that beautiful bar and not have
a drink.
cocktail.
And I mean.
And the singers are always incredible.
Yeah, and the drinks are always good. I mean,
Yeah.
I've become a fan of absinthe because of Mandalay, which is awesome. But yeah, we had an audience member lean on a 300-year-old painting, and that became a problem. Things changed so much during the run of Alving Estate because of things that audience members were doing, and it was interesting. It was one of those cases that audience members latched on to the supporting characters more than the principal characters.
Okay.
I think I had an audience member who came a couple of times to the run, say there was a moment where one of our staff was just improvising with an audience member and made her, because the ensemble was staff in this estate, this audience member said she had never felt as connected, as immersed, as when this person made her wash a window.
Wow.
Like, just this whole experience of being forced to participate in these like household tasks that the staff was doing, whether sweeping the floor, washing a window, or whatever, in this creepy old mansion, was really engaging for them. Yeah. And they enjoyed that more than...
Well, it's wonderful as well to hear that, and everyone I've spoken to is the same actually, things evolve and change in response to the audience as the run is going.
You have to.
Yeah.
We did only 2 performances of Curiosities, and we didn't make any major changes to the show. I said I refuse to make major changes. It's too much. But we reassessed a lot between the performances, and we decided that we needed to engage the audience more.
And it's going to develop, isn't it?
It's going to develop.
You're going to be doing more.
Well, I can officially announce now that we are going to be having a expanded run in a new secret location in December.
Excellent. So how do people need to keep informed about this?
Follow us on Twitter. It's Death's Head PR. And on Instagram, it's Death's Head Theatrical.
Lovely.
Or watch out on Broadway World and Playbill and all the places where you get your normal theater news. We tend to be on there. And we'll be popping up on other people's blogs and stuff, I'm sure, at some point.
So let's just kind of keep an ear out on the social media.
On the social media side of things. This version of Curiosities is going to be quite different. But I think we learned a lot from this run, and all the feedback we got from audience members, which is vastly important to us, because we're creating the work for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they're going to be engaged, they have to enjoy. It's been interesting because our first major public show, the Seance, was born out of this conversation that I had on the train. I was doing a production of Our Town. And a couple of us from New York would ride the train out to New Jersey together every day, and it just became this conversation of, I've always been fascinated by charlatans and mediums and that kind of Victorian parlor seance era and culture and things. And I put myself through college, but not only as a performer, but as a mentalist with a nightclub act. I would do 3 nights a week to pay my way through school. And I put that away many years ago, but it does creep into the work.
Of course, and every artist has that. They have the things that And sometimes you don't even notice it yourself until you look back. This will feed into my next question, actually. You look back over your work and you're like, I'm obviously really obsessed with these certain things that I didn't really realise until I started to review my kind of catalogue of work. And I guess everyone is the same.
But this question popped up is, would a Victorian parlor seance using all the same tricks and scams, nothing high-tech, nothing modern, would it still scare a modern audience? And that's what the seance was we recreated moment for moment, trick by trick, a Victorian parlor seance in a Victorian home. We did it a bunch of places.
Did it scare them?
Oh my goodness, yes it did. Yes it did. And it started, I did it before Death's Head was really a thing. I did a version of the show in DC, where I'm from originally. And then we would pop out to historical societies, would bring us in to create a version of the show based on the history of their space. We always wrap in the history of the place that we're in.
Yeah.
Because why not?
You can't not either, can you, when you're in those spaces there
and that's kind of the point, is to make it seem real.
Yeah.
And you have to. And boy, that show, we were surprised. We did 3 performances a night for 2 nights. Sold out very quickly. I mean, our audience sizes were small. I think it was like 25 or 35 people per show, because we had sitters at the table, and then we had people sitting in an outer ring.
Oh, okay.
And the show was only like 45 minutes long.
Would you say there were kind of 2 layers of participation in that then? Are the people in the inner ring kind of actively in the seance?
I mean, everyone was an active participant, but the people who were the sitters at the table, there were 12 of them, plus the medium, which makes 13 at the table. Were asked to participate, and one person was put inside a spirit cabinet, and things happened. And they were more active participants. They were asked to read things. But everybody...
of course, because they're in that space.
Well, when the dark section of the seance happened, and we lit the room with 3 bare light bulbs, period light bulbs, and there was a moment where... and a lantern that was on the table. There was a moment right before we got into the dark section as the medium was going around and turned off one light and turned off the second light and was walking to the third light, and the third one went out on its own. And it was like this, and then that's when the audience was like, because it started with, the seance was going well and things were going as the medium told them it would, and then things started happening that were slightly off. There was at one point where the medium was talking about historical things. We presented in kind of an academic way, and a book just slid down the bookshelf and fell off the bookshelf, and really startled the audience because it was a very clear, like a hand was pushing it across.
I love that. I love the fact that techniques from over 100 years ago
still scary.
Are still really effective to
honestly,
an
way
audience.
more scary. I went to a high-tech seance show recently that was like pneumatics and hydraulics and all this stuff, and I was like, I don't know. It was scary. It was not as scary when everything's so clean.
I like lo-fi.
I'm
kind of old-fashioned in that way.
I agree. So that was so scary, and people really loved it. And we talked about the historical impact of that mediumship era. And actually, we had someone from the New York Times come to the show, and we didn't know that they were coming.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up in this beautiful article about regilding the Gilded Age of New York, which was so...
I mean, things like that
nice.
Are perfect as well. This leads me to the final thing I was going to ask you about. I have quite a lot of anxiety as an academic and as a practitioner about the future legacy of this work, and I ask myself, even in 30 years' time, is there going to be much documentation of this? Is there going to be much left behind? Because, of course, it is about the experience, and that's why I love it. But as an academic as well, I'm frightened for its legacy because of things like secrecy, and because I know I'm the same. I'm making a piece of work, and I can't think of absolutely everything. And it's always afterwards I wish I'd filmed that. I wish I took a picture of that, and I haven't. And that scares me for the future of how it's remembered and its contribution to culture in the long term. And I wondered what you thought about that, because of course secrecy is such a big thing about the work that you do.
And it's hard because I like seeing immersive work. I can't see everything. I like to research. I like to stay updated on what's playing around me.
Yeah.
But like outside of a couple of commercials, There's nothing on Sleep No More, Then She Fell, Grand
Nope.
Paradise. There's
Nothing. Nothing.
Which is obviously, it's impossible to properly capture.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to do some kind of experience where you strap a GoPro to somebody's head
Yes.
and send them through the show.
Absolutely.
But
And even then, it's not going to be it,
That's not going to be it. Because you can't see all the one-on-ones. You
But there
can't see
might
everything.
be a strange black hole in 20 years' time when there's no record of any of these things left behind.
It's hard.
It makes me anxious. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to fix it, but it makes me anxious.
And rightfully so, and especially because there's so little of it going on in the U.S.
Yeah.
Especially of the small things.
Yes.
And small immersive theater productions tend to be the best.
Yes,
And tend
absolutely.
to be really involved, and that's it's a constant struggle. We try and take some pictures and stuff, but it's really hard because all the good ones have to be staged.
Yes, I'm exactly the same. I had to do, in the end, I've been trying to do my work, I've been making my work for 3 years, and in the end, I had to stage a specific version of it that we literally just documented. There was no audience, no nothing there. We just did it to get some images.
And that's so hard, and especially when you know.
I know, it's awful.
When I know people in the shows and whatnot, and like I'll see, for example, Leslie Odom Jr. from Hamilton. They occasionally have celebrity cameos in Sleep No More.
Yeah.
He popped in for a night and played the doctor. I think he only just did the one-on-one because it's a heavy gesture. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a great picture of him sitting in the chair. Well, the problem is all the people around him in masks are people that I know who work at the McKittrick. So they obviously staged that photo. And obviously, like, the regular audience members aren't going to know that.
No.
Like, these photos are so beautiful.
I know.
And it's, that iconic image with the lamps and all the people standing around.
Yeah.
Obviously,
It's staged.
they
But they have to be.
They have to be. You can't... Also,
we have the pressure here because, of course, we're always applying for funding.
Yeah.
So you need a portfolio. They need to see your work.
And so it's also so distracting. Could you imagine going to an immersive show where you have people walking around with big, like, professional cameras trying to take production stills? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so difficult.
So I don't know the answer, and I'm trying out a few different things, and none of them quite capture it. And I don't think anything will, but I do worry.
I mean, you can't. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about live
Yeah,
theater.
of
That's
course,
what I love
of
about,
course.
even if you have a 9-camera pro-shot version of a Broadway show,
It's not
the same.
Never, and it can't be. And that's what makes it so beautiful. But also, it's one of the things that means things slip out of their cultural legacy and they lose out on their cultural legacy. And I don't know what the answer is, and I'm hoping that a few of us academics can get together and at least think about ways to curate it.
Isn't that what's special about
it,
though?
It is.
Is that if you missed it, you missed it.
I know.
And unfortunately, some of these shows are going to fade into obscurity, and
They are.
no one's ever going to know that they happened. Which is,
apart from the handful of people.
If it's good, if people remember it,
yeah,
like, that's the thing.
It becomes myth then, and a lot of this, and all the stuff that remained from the 60s and 70s, the kind of things I'm interested in, from the Fluxus and happenings, and all, especially the happenings. The iconic ones, the ones that had a few images that are left behind, but they're the ones that people talked about and got documented through discussion, and in that way, and then they become kind of mythology, and maybe that's what will happen. Maybe we need to make sure that we have mythology.
There's some really interesting, and I love the really cool, intimate things that are happening in New York. There's a piece called The Illuminati Ball that's being produced by the same company that did Speakeasy Dollhouse, which is now back in Brooklyn. It's 35 audience members. Tickets are $450, but you get in a private limo, and they take you an hour and a half out of the city to a mansion in Pennsylvania countryside on a lake, and you participate in an Illuminati ball that's an exact mirror of the Rothschild Illuminati ball that there are a couple of images of with the mask. It's like a full evening of things, but like, imagine how many people get to see that and they can afford those tickets.
Well, that's the thing.
And they don't happen every night. It's like once or twice a month.
Yeah.
And there's almost no images or anything from the show.
Well, I couldn't go because I couldn't afford to pay that kind of ticket.
Neither. I would love to go.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, Cynthia, please tweet at Death's Head and send me a beautiful ticket to your Illuminati ball. I'll give you a ticket to Curiosities. How about that?
Exactly. That would be amazing.
Love Speakeasy Dollhouse. I haven't seen it since it moved. But there's some really cool pieces. The nice thing about Grand Paradise, it's not set in the 20s, 30s, or 40s. It's set
which
in the 70s.
a lot of things are, aren't they? They kind of sit within that particular period.
It works so well for the style.
Exactly.
Alving Estate was set in the 50s. Curiosities is 1936. Our Seance was like
late Victorian.
Late Victorian, which was interesting, and I really want to bring that show back in some capacity, in a bigger capacity. I just don't know how.
Well, you should definitely bring something to the UK. I think audiences here would go wild because we don't really have that kind of immersive work here.
I would love to do that. If you know ways that I can get money and space.
If any of the producers from BAC are listening, I know some of you. Get in touch.
Please.
It'll be ideal for here as well. It's exactly the kind of thing that would work.
This is a beautiful space, and I could bring you all something really creepy and fun and dark and intense. One of our joke taglines that we always say in our meeting is, "Death's Head is like camping or the circus. It's intense." We always either start or end our production meetings with that horrible joke.
That is perfect. Well, I think that's going to be a perfect place for us to finish. You're only here in the UK for a very short period of time, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
For giving me part of that very short time. I'm actually running off to Portsmouth now to see an immersive event this evening. So.
I'm seeing LaFont's Games Afoot tonight, which is very exciting. I had to see something immersive while I was in town.
I have to tweet about it because I've been to the other experience.
Yeah, so. I'm very excited. I'm excited to see how it's different. And I learned about LaFont by listening to the podcast.
Yes.
And now I'm obsessed with everything of theirs.
Well, James and Ollie seem to be crazy busy. They've done Les Enfants are doing mad amounts of shows at the moment, which is amazing. So you'll be able to catch them in all kinds of different ways. Thank you very much. Have a lovely time with your family, because I know you're here visiting family.
Yes.
And have a very safe journey back when you do
head
back
so
over
much.
the pond.
and thank you all for listening to my very different accent than you're, I'm sure, used to hearing on this podcast.
It's probably a very nice change from my voice, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all you folks listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. As usual, it would be really lovely to hear from you. Tweet me, email or Facebook. All your comments and feedback are most welcome. I would love to hear your thoughts. And actually, recently I've been wondering who it is that's listening and where they're listening from. I have got lots and lots of stats, but they're really impersonal and I would love to hear from you. So do get in touch and tell me who you are and where you're listening, just because I want to know, really. And of course, share. The more the merrier. To any immersivites, immersivonians, or people you know who just might have a passing interest in immersive performance. Share. I would be very, very grateful. Thank you very much. So until next month, bye.